Hey everybody, and welcome back to this very spooky episode of Transit Tangents. My name's Chris.
And I'm Lewis.
And today we are going to bring you one of our first ever attempts at doing a top 10 list. And this is the top 10 transit villains. Lewis, what is a transit villain?
A transit villain is almost exactly what it sounds. I mean, somebody who is trying to actively work against public transit in a lot of cases. Not, some of these on this list might not be people. There's also just some topics and things. Some of these are more fun than others. Some of them are very real.
Yeah.
Some of these folks we've talked about on the channel before, so you might see some familiar faces. But yeah, we figured as we're approaching Halloween, we'll make it a little spooky here and talk about some doom and gloom in transit.
Yeah, as you said, it's not just people. It can be organizations, or it can be policies, or things that are kind of lurking in the future.
Yes.
So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into this list, starting out with number 10. And Lewis warned me not to put this on the list because I would get a lot of backlash from people.
Yep, I'm glad you prefaced this. Yeah, and you prefaced that I was against it, but that's fine. That's all right. We're good.
My number my number 10 transit villain is the California high-speed rail.
And before you all jump on Chris here and yell at him about this,
I just heard so many people turn off the video right now.
Oh, yeah. And some angry comments down below.
Already typing.
When we've talked a little bit of shit about California high-speed rail in the past, there were a lot of angry commenters. And honestly, I'll give them some credit. A lot of it is some good reason. I mean, California high-speed rail is absolutely trying to do something crazy for America, right? This is the first real high-speed rail line that we're going to see across the country, but it is just so often and so easy for folks who are against transit to point to it as a reason why transit is bad and we shouldn't be wasting our money. I'm putting quotes up on this, wasting our money on this sort of stuff. It's a boondoggle. It's all of this stuff. It's been so easy for folks to point to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it's easy to do so. The project currently has a $100 million shortfall. Out of the 800 miles of planned length, only a fraction has been built. So in a lot of ways, we are in full support of the California high-speed rail network. So let's just put that out there. We are in absolute full support.
And to be clear, it is making forward progress, but they've definitely hit snafus along the way.
Absolutely.
And
I called it my transit anti-hero versus my transit villain.
Yes.
And the way that I keep visualizing it in my head is that it is the big monster coming over the mountain that's just misunderstood.
It's misunderstood, right? So, yes, that's number 10, though. I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts on that. So
number 10 is our transit villain, only because it is easy to point to vilify public transit.
Yes, sending lots of good vibes to, So someone should cast a spell to stay on theme towards California high-speed rail, but a good spell, a happy spell.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Moving on to number 9 on the list is the man, the myth, the legend here, the highway harbinger himself, Robert Moses.
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening to this, if you are a transportation nerd, which I'm sure you probably are, you know the name Robert Moses. He still haunts us to this day with some of the projects that he tried to, in some cases successfully, was able to implement, especially in the New York area.
Yeah, and I mean, he's the quintessential highwayman. I can't think of anyone better to represent just that a highway is going to solve all of your traffic problems than Robert Moses.
I enjoy getting things done.
But that means being
Getting
only in the
rid of
process.
obstacles that are in the way by whatever means.
This pesky neighborhood in the way, doesn't matter. Just bulldoze it.
Plow through it. I mean, you name it. At one point we were kind of looking at his track record before this. At one point he was actually a housing advisor to the governor of New York. I can only imagine that his housing advice is just build suburbs further and further and further away from the city and just connect them by more highways so that you can get around, because Americans are just going to only use a car to get everywhere, and we can just continue to add one more lane, bro, and we'll just build our way out of this if we need to knock down another home. Robert Moses says, why not? I mean, it's just another home. Why do we need another pesky house when we can add another lane? I don't see it. I don't know.
If the end doesn't justify the means, what does?
We won't spend a whole lot of time on Robert Moses today. That could be an entire other series of episodes to really get into everything about him. But I will leave you with this. If you've ever seen a map of New York City that's just crisscrossed by highways, that was Robert Moses's plan. And thankfully, people in New York fought him and were able to cancel those plans. And now New York is this thriving, beautiful, still traffic-prone city, but this thriving, beautiful city today with a lot of different neighborhoods that have been preserved. That was not the case in some of the other communities that he touched.
Totally. And we're going to revisit New York a little bit later.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Number 8 on this list. This one doesn't need a special name because it's already on theme.
Yeah.
Number 8 is the Ghost Bus.
Ghost Bus. We don't know if this is a phantom of ghost past rolling past your bus stop, if it is an ill-fated trip on the 30 in Austin, who knows. But everybody who uses the bus regularly has probably looked at their transit app and seen that a bus was approaching in 1 minute, and then a bus is approaching in 30 seconds, and then it's there, and then it's gone, and no bus ever showed up.
Right. I mean, and it's an issue. We see it here in Austin. I'm sure you see it where you live. I don't know exactly how these work because I have been in a situation where you're literally looking at your transit app with the thing on the map, not the transit app, but your transit agency's app with the bus on the map, and you're watching it approach you, and you're just like, what is happening here? There's not a bus there, but absolutely, ghost buses are a top 10 transit fill-in. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And it's happened to us while we've been out actively filming. We have seen this happen. It happened to us in New Orleans. I think we had a
That's
ghost
right.
bus
We
go
did have
by.
a ghost bus.
Yeah,
Gust bus.
so-
Yes. We're still here.
We went from 12 minutes to 6 minutes to 11 minutes.
It does say that it's going to come around the corner any second.
It said that many seconds ago.
So we'll see. Hopefully it's not a phantom bus.
So we have direct experience with these ghost busts. So if somebody wants to comment and tell us how exactly it happens, we'd love to hear.
That would be
to
a
learn
fun.
more about it.
We'll have to see if we can get a transit agency willing to talk about. It would have to be them talking about their own flaws of having a ghost bus, but we'll have to see if we can get someone to talk about it.
That'd be fun.
It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
But all right.
Moving on, we have number 7 on our list. Now, this is going to be local, so people in Austin may recognize this name. But number 7 is the NIMBY necromancer himself, Bill Aleshire.
Now, for those of you out of town, your city probably has your own version of Bill Aleshire, but Bill Aleshire kind of represents the person who, it's really easy to say no to a transit project or to anything really. And he is that person in a form of a lawyer who does whatever he can to try to sue his way out of a project happening, I guess, if that makes sense. Under the guise, though, of I'm just really looking out for transparency's purposes, and I'm trying to save the taxpayers money, when in reality, most of his lawsuits are really just a sense to try to delay.
I think it's just his hobby.
Maybe
I don't think he
yeah.
has anything else to do except for file lawsuits against the city.
He does spend a lot of time tweeting about it and taking the bait from all sorts of people where he kind of, I don't want to be too mean here, but it's like some of the tweets are a little wild. I don't know.
We have added him to the list because we are in huge support of Project Connect. As you probably just saw, we had our Project Connect episode come out earlier this month. And Bill Aleshire and some of his friends have repeatedly tried to stop Project Connect. And it's not just Project Connect. A lot of times it is large urban development projects that would be really beneficial to the public transit in Austin. And they are actively fighting against them, finding every little nook and cranny and nuance in the law to really needle the city and get a lot of these projects stopped. So he is sort of the ultimate Austin NIMBY, if we're using NIMBY in a negative way.
Which
which we are.
It is, yeah.
And so that's why he has made our list at number 7.
Absolutely. Moving on to number 6, autonomous vehicles, and this is the false prophet of transit.
Transportation salvation.
Yes. Oh, that's way better. Oh my God, the false prophet of transportation salvation.
Yes.
Love it. So autonomous vehicles, while personally, I think there are a lot of cool elements to them. They're often used as a when you're having a conversation with someone as the alternative to needing to build more trains, the alternative to needing to have buses, to have light rail.
Why do you need a bus if you can get on your phone and call an autonomous vehicle to come to you and take you wherever you need?
Well, and I mean, very soon from now, all of them are going to all interact with each other. There'll be no other cars on the road. You can eliminate stoplights, and everyone will be able to just get into an autonomous vehicle, get around, no problem. So why should we invest in any of these other technologies when clearly this is going to happen, like, I don't know, 5 years from now or something, right? We're going to get rid of everything else.
I can just imagine, the paradox of adding one more lane, like the Katy Freeway. We pick on it a lot, but it keeps expanding lane by lane. I feel like this is going to be a very similar paradox.
Yes.
There's going to be a demand for autonomous vehicles, and you're going to end up with just as much, if not more, congestion, because now everyone just has their own private little robot car that's driving them around.
Right, and even if we're sharing them, which is the best case scenario of it, there's still, you run into the physics problem of in a city there is only so much room for more vehicles on the road, and autonomous vehicles don't solve that. Now, I don't want to be doom and gloom on autonomous vehicles because I do think that there is a lot of potential positives out of autonomous vehicles. One of them I think of is safety. Frankly, in a lot of cases, I feel like I trust the autonomous vehicles more than I trust somebody who's texting and driving down the side of the road, or someone who just had 4 beers and thinks they're fine to go drive home. I feel like the autonomous vehicle is going to potentially help in that sort of situation. So not necessarily all negative there.
And also, I think they can be good stopgap measures for end of the line service.
Totally.
So something we talked about before this episode, we did our Project Connect episode, and we talked about the Cat Metro pickup zones, which are areas that are sort of in a transit desert, and you can use your app, sort of like Uber, and a public transport will come and pick you up. Now, why is that different than calling an Uber or calling a normal taxi? I don't know. But that is one use case for being able to use public transit to get you to move around.
Totally. One other issue here on the autonomous vehicles too is it kind of leaves out a lot of populations that might not be able to get onto this vehicle by themselves. A lot of the other services, even if you're getting on a regular bus today, the driver is going to open a ramp for you and help attach your wheelchair to the bus. There needs to be a lot more thought into how do we actually make autonomous vehicles good for communities that you're probably not initially thinking about as
absolutely.
It's being done.
So the reason we have this as the false prophet of transportation salvation or traffic salvation is that you're still not moving enough people. And I understand disrupting certain industries, but when it comes to transit, the train works.
Totally.
Just build the train.
Stay tuned, though. We will be doing a full episode soon on autonomous vehicles. So stay tuned for that. We're going to jump right back into this episode in just a second, but first, if you have not liked this video or subscribed, please consider doing so. It helps us out quite a bit. Also, leave a comment. We love reading them.
Absolutely. And if you don't have time to watch YouTube videos every time we release, you can always catch us on your favorite podcasting platform, from Spotify to Apple to anywhere podcasts are available.
And if you want to support the show, we now have a Patreon launched. You get lots of additional benefits for being a member on Patreon. All the information for that is in the description. But without further ado, let's jump back into the episode. Moving on, though, number 5 on the list.
This is probably the scariest one on our list.
Yeah, I agree. We're calling this the Policy Puppet Masters. Project 2025 here. So this
and its friends.
And its friends, yes. So Project 2025, if you haven't heard of it at this point, you live under a rock. I would also say too, these are all short. This is a fun video. If you are interested in the specific implications that Project 2025 will have on public transit, City Nerd has done not one, but 2 videos on this, pretty in-depth. We'll put links below to them. He does a much better job going in detail of 15-20 minutes just on public transit and cities and urbanism in general and the bad things inside of Project 2025 that are related to it. But in general, a lot of the plans within Project 2025 make funding for public transportation projects much more difficult. It cuts off a lot of federal spending in general and puts a lot of the burden on state and local governments, which, we're seeing it here in Austin, but you see it everywhere. Trying to build out a new public transit system is billions and billions of dollars if you're starting from scratch. That is a burden that a city on its own in no part of the country can do on its own without help from the federal government. And Project 2025 makes those sorts of things so much more difficult, if not impossible in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned Project 2025 and its friends. So Project 2025 is sort of the baby of the Heritage Foundation, which, again, unless you live under a rock, you've heard of the Heritage Foundation.
It's a big conservative think tank.
Yes.
They help craft policy and all of this sort of stuff.
Similar to them, there's also the Americans for Prosperity. which are run by the Koch brothers. And Americans for Prosperity seems to also have its hands in so many different local markets. I mean, when we talk about in LA fighting bike lanes, Americans for Prosperity are there. When we talk about Project Connect here in Austin, it's the same thing. You know, people from Americans for Prosperity are friends with Bill Aleshire. They show up to these city council meetings. So when we talk about the policy puppet masters, they're these organizations that are these policy think tanks that are really pushing policies that we think are dangerous for communities when it comes to public transit. They're actively fighting against public transit, which, as we're moving into election season, we're not going to make this all about politics, but as we move into election season, keep that in mind. Think about the people and the organizations that are actively pushing policies that are going to hurt your community by not allowing these types of projects, and vote against them. Vote for the people who speak up and are supporting projects in your community.
And find those in your community. And I'm going to take a moment in every episode until Election Day to mention some of the people in Austin doing that. The one in particular I've supported the most, Adam Powell, District 7. If you live in Austin, District 7, check him out. But there are people like Adam in cities across the country. Find those people, support them. You still got a couple, 2 weeks when this episode comes out until Election Day. Volunteer to go spend one of your Saturdays and knock doors for 2 hours. It really makes a big difference, especially in the local elections. But pay attention to these federal ones too, because this is a thing in the federal elections. Even though apparently Trump's never heard of Project 2025 and hasn't read it before, so I don't know.
Moving on to number 4.
Yes, thank you.
Moving on to number 4, it's our congestion consortiums, the organizations that are really fighting these concepts that could actually alleviate congestion. And what we're talking about are highway-focused transportation agencies. In a lot of cases, these are going to be state agencies. We pick on TxDOT a lot because TxDOT is really, for its existence, been a highway building organization. But this is true for almost any transportation department around the country. Generally, transportation departments are very highway and road focused and less transit focused.
Absolutely. And I mean, we pick on TxDOT now, and there is maybe a slight hope. We had an interview that'll be coming out in a couple weeks with someone from Transit Forward, and we discussed the fact that TxDOT actually has some like multimodal stuff being included in their plans now, which is very positive news. However, historically, it's essentially, I mean, you can look at any city in Texas, and you've got the Katy Freeway in Houston. You've got the plans to widen I-35 here in Austin. In general, it's just like, let's build a wider highway. Let's make a giant interchange. I mean, they're fantastic at building giant interchanges, but maybe we could get them to make giant train interchanges at some point in the future. I don't know. But yeah.
So this is on our list because, as you said, any new project that goes in really needs the state DOT to support it. For instance, Project Connect, we would love the Texas DOT to be 100% behind it and pushing it instead of adding extra lanes to I-35 in Austin.
Totally. And in a lot of cases, too, these state-funded transportation agencies receive a big majority of their funding from the federal government.
Yes.
And even if a local government wants to work on a project, it would be much more beneficial if the local governments and the state transportation agencies could be more aligned so that there could be more of a team effort in applying for some of this federal funding to get these projects done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We also have to mention that these state transportation agencies are not inherently evil or mean-spirited about these things. They really get their direction and funding from the top. So when we're looking at these transportation agencies, really look at the governor and the legislature. That's where they're getting their direction from. So that's why they're the congestion consortium.
Absolutely. All right, we're down to the top 3 here. We've got 2 people and one more thing. All right, so number 3. This one is the sprawling specter, restrictive zoning policies. As we've talked about on this channel quite a bit, housing and transit go absolutely hand in hand. Denser areas where it's legal to build apartment buildings or ADUs or whatever it may be, row homes, all this sort of stuff. Those places are not only easier to serve by transit, but you get more transit ridership in those areas. The opposite of that is having restrictive zoning policy, mandating large minimum lot sizes, having areas where you can only have single family zoning with no commercial mixed inside of it, all sorts of things like that. Restrictive zoning policy is one of the things that hampers transit from being successful in so many parts of the country across the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the absolute driver of these large sprawling cities where you have single-story family homes and endless suburbia, those become so untenable if you're trying to run a public transit network. And it not only just affects your public transit network, it also affects things like your school system.
Yep.
You know, we're going to do an episode coming up in the future about how school systems are really struggling to provide bus services for kids because suburbs have expanded so far and their transportation budgets are now just continuing to grow out of control. So stay tuned for that one. But
right. And again, gold star to like our Austin City Council right now. We've done a lot in the last 2 years on zoning, making minimum lot sizes smaller, working on equitable transit-oriented development around where the light rail will be, around where existing rapid bus lines are, and all this sort of stuff. So, if you do all the right things, you can make things happen. We talked about this last week in the episode about Louisville as well, that they have a lot of potential to potentially do some of this stuff in the future. And if you're interested in this, we did an episode talking about like what a better suburb kind of could look like, inspired by a Streetcraft video.
Yes.
We'll put a link there. And if you haven't seen the Streetcraft videos, then this is a topic you're interested in. You're probably interested in some of that as well. So
all right.
moving on to the final two. Get your guesses in. See if you can guess it ahead of time. But
number 2 is a little closer to home. It is the Texas Multimodal Transportation Massacre. That's not a mouthful.
I'll take credit for the name on that one. Well, you had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, and I was like, multimodal. That's the.
And this one, we were talking about the mayor of Houston, John Whitmer.
Yes. If you have seen anything about Houston Transit in the last 2 years or so since John Whitmer has become mayor, there's no way that it hasn't been a bad thing. It's all been bad news after bad news after bad news, whether it's cutting existing BRT lines, whether it's getting rid of bus lanes,
Bike share,
whether it's cutting bike share entirely, whether it is undoing road diets or traffic calming measures that have already been done, like after the money has been spent to install it, literally going and uninstalling it and repaving sections. It is just nightmare after nightmare after nightmare.
We called him the champion of suburbia.
Yeah.
What was his quote? His doom quote.
So that quote was, again, direct quote here. We will not sacrifice general mobility for recreation when talking about bike lanes, because everyone who rides their bike in a city is out just doing it purely for recreation. They don't matter. We can't sacrifice general mobility for recreation. A direct quote. And there's
what an evil supervillain quote.
Totally. Yeah. And there is more, like, if we wanted to spend a long time on this topic, which we will in a future video. Like, there's going to be some Houston content coming
soon.
I mean, number 2 on the list, John Whitmer. Yeah.
The anti-car activists in the previous administration, anti-car activists.
Yeah.
Our very own Texas Multimodal Transportation Massacre.
Absolutely.
Massacreist.
And we're down to the number 1. Before we get to the number 1, though, I will say, if you made it this far through the video, if you haven't liked it already, please like the video, leave a comment, all that good stuff. Subscribe, consider doing that.
Yeah, if you haven't joined our Patreon yet, this is a good opportunity to go ahead and join that. Let us know who your transit villains are, because once you join the Patreon, you can join the Discord, and you can add in there who you think we missed. Who are your top 10 maybe in your location?
Absolutely, and it could be a topic for a future episode.
Absolutely.
With that being said, we're revisiting an old friend for number 1 on the list here.
I referred to her as the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of MTA transit funding.
Yes. If you haven't guessed already.
I'm speaking of none other than Kathy Hochul.
Yes. So we talked about this in the congestion pricing episode probably 2 or 3 months ago at this point. For those of you who are unfamiliar, congestion pricing would have essentially put a toll for folks driving in Lower Manhattan below 60th Street. This is some of the best area of the country, arguably the world, served by transit. It does not make sense to, have it be totally free for folks to be driving around in a car. We covered all this stuff in detail in the episode. I recommend you go watch it. I think it was a really good episode, and not as many people saw it. So,
and this is something that really started from the governor's office. It was something that was being pushed by Cuomo before Kathy Hochul.
Yes.
It was a huge pet project of theirs. And when Kathy Hochul stepped into the governor's office, she continued to push this project. And everything looked so good
yes.
As we were leading into it. And then 2 weeks before the project was officially to go live, Well, that's when Mr. Hyde came out and decided to cut all progress on this project.
And we ended up with Congestion Kathy as we have today. I mean, she literally changed her tune in less than 6 months. In December of 2023, she has this speech, and I'll play the clip actually right here. You can see how for congestion pricing she actually was, and then right after we'll show you how much her tune changed. In that full episode, we get into all the reasons why. Again, you should go watch it, but let's take a listen to those clips.
Anybody want cleaner air for our kids and for future generations? Yes! Well, then you love congestion pricing, right? Yes! Circumstances have changed, and we must respond to the facts on the ground, not from the rhetoric from 5 years ago. I have come to the difficult decision that implementing the planned congestion pricing system risks too many unintended consequences for New Yorkers at this time.
Wild. I mean,
Absolutely wild.
So we'll see. I mean, not all hope is lost. There have been a couple updates on this. It is still stopped for the time being. I know there was a lawsuit that is essentially saying like Kathy Hochul doesn't necessarily have the authority to just stop this on her own. We'll ultimately see where it ends up, but this would have just directly sent so much money to the MTA to upgrade the subways, to make stations more accessible for folks in wheelchairs.
That's the biggest one to me, like fixing all the damn elevators going into the subway stations, because every time I go to New York, I don't think I've ever seen an elevator actually work.
Absolutely. And I mean, in general, it's just like the system, I mean, there's a lot of trains moving through, like a lot of people use it. It's great. I was just in New York for the first time in a while a couple weeks ago, and it is impressive how much is getting there, but like it just looks so rough. Like everything looks so rough, and you're just like, oh my God, like this is like the best we have in the whole country. And the fact that Kathy Hochul is single-handedly on her own preventing it from getting the funding that it needs.
Well, let's not say single-handedly on her own. You have to admit all of the car lobby that was right behind her.
Yes, the car. That is true. But Kathy Hochul, the reason she takes number one is just like, that is the most direct, like, one person hampering progress for the largest city in the United States for transit is just, it's unbelievable. There's not much else to say about it.
So with all that, that is our top 10 transit villains. If you have others that you would have added to the list, which I'm sure you do, please add those into the comments on the YouTube video or send it to us via email. You can also reach us on our website, transittangents.com. There's a contact form there as well.
Totally. And if you want to see more content from us beyond every Tuesday, we did just launch a Patreon recently. If you're able to support us there, it would be much appreciated. You get access to a Discord server. You get access to episodes early. If we're done editing them, we're going to work on trying to have them be a week ahead of time. We'll also record things like reactions to comments from videos to give a little bit more back and forth to your comments that you leave.
Also full conversations from interviews that we conduct.
Totally.
So we do have a lot of extra footage usually that we have to cut out.
With all that being said, though, thank you all so much for watching.
Enjoy your spooky season.
Absolutely.
And
have a great...
enjoy the rest of your
Transit Tangents Tuesday. We try to mix it up once.
Yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit's where it's at. Watch me go.